Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we'll be talking about a weather pattern that is rather extraordinary and pretty rare. It doesn't always happen, especially at this time of the year, and you may actually be surprised what pattern I'm talking about. So let's just start talking about it, right, so I don't waste any more of your time. So the pattern I'm talking about is the one that's going to be ongoing in the next few days, and it's going to be lasting for at least this upcoming week. And this pattern is just includes a very calm period of weather that we don't always necessarily see, especially for such a prolonged period of time during a rather active time of the year, which is usually mid to late fall, which is kind of what we're in right now. So yeah, it's nothing really that is concerning, no big storms. It's actually a pattern that is void of them, and it's still pretty extraordinary because of just not really a lot of activity. And the reason is I wasn't gonna make a video early today, but then I was kind of just looking at this and I was like, dang, there's really not that much going on. We do have some activity across the western United States, right? Notice a little bit of a storm across the south, but you can see that both of these, especially the one across the northwest, it falls apart rather quickly by the time we get into Friday. The one across the south, it could have a little bit of severe weather for these areas. But look at the rest of the United States, right? I mean, for the entirety of the U.S. to be precip free, that would be very hard. But this is pretty much as close as you usually get. You have a little system right here. Elsewhere, though, you can see it's not even cold. It's just a very nice, pleasant pattern, and it's gonna last for a little while longer. Notice that there's gonna be constant flows of precip into the northwest and southwestern Canada, so that's gonna be the exception. Notice that the system across the south, it's slow moving, but it's not massive. It's gonna be bringing some showers, some storms, so that's definitely something noteworthy. But it's almost like it's too quiet, right? Something seems off, but I mean, quite frankly, it just isn't. Sometimes this is just how the weather patterns form up, and they do sometimes do this, where you just have a long period of relatively calm weather. Sometimes you could see this in the summer, like early summer. Sometimes during May there are periods like this, but even those are kind of hard to come across. Severe weather is usually pretty rampant and doesn't take much to trigger at those time of the years. During those time of the year, during those times of the year. But yeah, notice as I push this into Monday of next week, right? So this is already many days out. We do have activity across the northwest per usual. You can see the system across the east. Very light rain, so Halloween, even these areas that are getting impacted by this aren't going to be seeing all-day rain events. There's going to be some areas that pick up maybe a little bit, throughout a few hours of the day, and then that's pretty much it. It doesn't intensify as it goes off the coast. It pretty much just kind of drifts off. Nothing really noteworthy from that storm. Do note that we do have a little bit of cold air towards the north that seemingly might start moving in. You can see it becomes a bit more concave, being a little bit more action out ahead of them. These cold fronts are a bit more, driving force behind them. And that's when we start seeing potentially some more activity into next week, around this time next week, so Wednesday. But that's 7 days out. Notice that storm across the northeast lifts out, and we do see activity still relatively limited to just the northern United States. Even when there is a storm that is kind of penetrates into areas that weren't seeing any activity, it's still rather calm. I mean, look at the rest of the United States. We have a high pressure here still pumping continuously warm air very far north, and elsewhere the cold air, it's there, but it's nothing too extensive, and it's not even a massive storm. It's kind of like a clipper. Now, there does seem to be a growing consensus with the models that at around this time there could be a large system that moves in towards the north and west, and that's when the pattern starts getting reactive again, except it's still a little bit too far away. I do obviously want to show you it. Notice that's around Thursday of next week, but it's still too far away to be kind of making predictive videos about. So I don't really want to talk about that. I definitely do want to mention, though, that it could be happening. So around a little bit more than a week from today, we could start seeing some pretty nasty storms. You can see the European really shows a beast of a system that actually develops. So that may or may not happen. We'll have to see. Again, usually these calm patterns don't last for long, so this is definitely something that could be happening. More activity. I wouldn't be surprised. Looking at the GFS, very similar. So we have that system that's pulling away. It's gonna develop into a pretty nasty snowstorm across southeastern Canada. But again, as I was mentioning, in terms of the precipitation, a few pockets, areas of precip elsewhere. Look at that. I mean, that is very empty. So this holiday weekend, Halloween weekend, I should rather say. well, holiday weekend as well, will be rather dry and calm for a lot of these areas. I mean, seriously, most areas will be experiencing very nice weather, and to add to that, it's not going to be really cold. It's going to be pretty warm. It's not going to be super hot, but even if it were to be, way above average, it's the time of the year where it's hard to get massive heat waves. With heat that's annoying. At this point, it's more, even if it's 25 degrees above average, it's more just kind of these pleasant temperatures that occur. And yeah, that warmth continues. You can see there are a few pockets of precipitation. The GFS and its ensembles do bring in that large system around a similar time the European starts showing activity, except the European really brings in a big storm. And this at first sight may, be bad news. It's breaking the calm pattern. For the west, it will be. For the east, you're still high and dry for at least the next few days into early next week. At this point already, again, November 3rd. This is good news, though. A lot of these areas are dry, especially southern Nevada, kind of southwestern Utah. And look, this system's going to be dumping a lot of moisture there, so that's definitely going to be beneficial. Definitely could be several feet of snow to Colorado as well, Arizona, New Mexico. And you can see that shoots up some moisture into the northern United States and probably even exaggerates some of this warm air that's been going on across the east. So really, if you live across the eastern United States, there will be a little bit of a storm again this upcoming weekend across the south. Again, not extensive. It won't be super powerful. It's going to be one day of showery weather for any given area, and then it's out of there. And otherwise, it's going to be gorgeous. It's going to be very nice, very calm. Even when it's not warm, it's going to be rather calm, but for the most part, it's going to be warm for these areas. And you can see that the GFS doesn't really materialize any big system out of this like the European did. So again, there's some disagreement, but even if it does at this point, that's still over 200 hours of, relatively calm weather pattern, like temperatures and, just weather conditions that are calm and temperatures that are pretty warm. And obviously, it does seem, though, that as we get towards early November, the pattern will get active. There are some growing signs in terms of that and some more cool air. But at that point, that's, that wouldn't be surprising. So let me go and take a glance at the 2-meter temperature anomaly. So this is just gives us whether or not, shows us whether or not the temperatures are above or below average at the given time of the year based on historical climatology. Notice the more orange colors you see, the more warmer it is. Let me take you back. Okay, so let's start it out as this upcoming Thursday, Friday. You can see the anomalies on the cool side. Since they're there, it's not going to really be too cold. It's going to be seasonal, pretty much where they're supposed to be. And even the areas that are cooler, they're going to start quickly flipping into those warmer colors. And you can see by the end of this upcoming weekend into Halloween Day, a lot of these areas are warm, and this continues intensifying, especially if we do end up seeing that massive system move into the northwest. That will exaggerate, again, some of this heat here. It will cool things down across the west and northwest, but you wouldn't really want a heat wave across the west. You don't want to increase the risk of wildfires and whatnot, and these big storms will bring a lot of precipitation and whatnot that could cool these, or just wet and moistened conditions so that the fire danger isn't as high. So if it were to be cool, it's good that it's this area. And yeah, you can see that the eastern United States is definitely going to be experiencing some very warm temperatures. Now, obviously, it's not going to be 90s, right? It's already November when this is occurring, but 60s, 70s, you could expect that to be occurring. And for November, that is very nice, and those are actually very, very warm temperatures. Let me go back to these anomalies to help you visualize this. Obviously, towards the end of the next week, so again, the time frame is pretty long here, we could start assuming that some of this cool, warm air will start moving out. But you can see it's still pretty stubborn, and potentially well into early November, this warm air maintains itself. Now, I don't believe the European model is as stubborn with that with that warm air. You can see once that system, if it were to occur, if you recall, the Europeans showed that massive system occurring towards the very end. That would wipe out a lot of the warm air and introduce most likely a cooler pattern, or at least a more seasonable pattern. And you can see the colors marking behind that system are a bit more blue, indicating some cooler air moving in. But otherwise, regardless, I meant to say both these models up for the next 200 hours show a relatively calm, dry pattern. If we were to take a look at the relative humidity, so kind of a good measure of moisture in the air, it will be running rather low for the next few days and into this next week. You can see this is Thursday, so there will be a few pockets of enhanced moisture you can see across the Midwest. Nothing really extraordinary enough to make a giant rainmaker, excluding the south where there will be some storms and showers you could see. But yeah, for a lot of these areas, just nothing extraordinary. There won't be any drivers of strong winds or these massive amounts of moisture being pumped in. It's going to be pretty calm, and that's what's going to keep this pattern relatively stable. And again, we could start seeing some activity around next week, a week from right now, but even that seems rather limited. And it's only when we start seeing some of those large western systems move further inland that we could expect that. And again, for the next few days, there will be systems moving in towards the northwest, but they'll just be falling apart and won't be making it far inland. So, while I am talking about a warmer and cooler pattern just through hour 150, the northwest and southwestern Canada will be experiencing quite a bit of precipitation. Notice the south as well, a decent amount. Again, this may look impressive, and it is. But it's actually also very beneficial. These areas need this rain, especially across Texas. But it's not going to be lasting for more than 1 or 2 days across these areas. But look, some of these rainfall amounts here are definitely impressive. And if you push this further out, you can see that they continue and potentially expand towards the south and west. The GFS really is an advocate of some of those precip amounts hitting these southwestern areas pretty heavily. And the pattern you can see clearly gets more active overall. If you were to take a look at the Canadian model with its MSLP and precip forecast, it's more similar to the European, and I'll show you why. Notice it's calm, just like the European and GFS mainly show for the rest of the United States, excluding the south and extreme northwestern United States. And you can see that into Tuesday, Wednesday, it's still very nice warm air. We do have a little system that actually moves in, similarly to what the European shows, potentially across the northern plains, delivering some snow. You can see the Canadian model kind of prolongs that system and keeps it around, eventually developing it into a pretty nasty system, which, if you recall, the European does similarly in the last slide of the Canadian to the last slide of the European, which are again both at hour 240. You can see a pretty similar pattern going on. Big storm and new storms moving in from the north and west. So yeah, expect more activity for sure from early November. But that's I guess even the first few days of November will be calm. So the rest of October look pretty calm. So November 26th, 7th, October 26th, well, I'm recording on the 26th, but 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, November 1st, 2nd, mostly dry and calm for the vast majority of the U.S., again, excluding a few areas that could be seeing a bit more activity. So yeah, maybe not something you were looking for, maybe you were excited for the pattern getting active, and for now, it just won't be. There won't be anything to be concerned about, but for fall cleanup and whatnot, don't delay it, because this type of fall weather doesn't usually or always happen, and it won't last long. So if you have any things that you want to do outside, projects and whatnot, get those done now, because come early November, there are growing signs, especially if you look at some of the ensemble models, that there will be a lot more activity. I'm looking at a German model now. You can see very similar, slow-moving system, some cloud cover from that, obviously, but elsewhere, truly a relatively calm pattern, no big systems, excluding the northwest, but that is even those systems end up falling apart very quickly once they hit the United States and kind of Canadian coasts. If I were to take a look at the 2-meter temperature anomaly in terms of what the ensembles show in terms of the temperature, so kind of the trends, again, it's going to be trending from a relatively modest pattern, more of a cooler pattern, towards quickly more of a warmer pattern. Not hot at first, but then eventually, if you do see several systems moving towards the west, they could start pumping in a lot of that warm air here, and that could really, again, increase. And every time you see those two, strong air masses, cool and warm, you know that there's going to be some big storms. So, and that happens to be the case. So, but again, far out into November, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some cooler air starting to move into the northern United States. And cooler meaning cooler than average, so much cooler compared to what we're going to be seeing, especially since these areas are going to be seeing above average. Looking at the European ensembles, relatively the same trend. Again, more of a cooler pattern right now, and then eventually getting warm, and then potentially even hot again for obviously October, November standards. You won't be seeing 90s, but 60s and 70s, that's pretty hot for this time of the year. And notice, again, it does introduce those two air masses, those conflicting air masses. Whenever that happens, there's going to be some sort of activity. And what we do note is that some of this warm air here potentially maybe begins dwindling away, giving way to some cooler air. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on for. I could show you the CFS. It's a climate model. It's definitely a good model, but it's more used to see kind of if there's going to be any trend. And well, obviously it's going to be calm for now, but I want to see what it shows for early November as it goes out very far. In terms of storms, it's pretty inaccurate. You can't really count on it to give you an accurate forecast of a storm, but the overall pattern, and you can see just like the other two models, it keeps it relatively calm up until again around 200 hours, and that's when it starts showing some of those bigger systems, a lot of that Pacific moisture, and you can see as we push into November, the climate model really starts showing storm after storm, moving into the kind of the western United States, which would be good news for those areas that need that rain and moisture, and elsewhere that would lead to, well, quite an active pattern as well. Big storms, snow systems, yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, we're going to start seeing, areas that are going to start seeing snow further south. At this point, this is late November, so that's at least what you can expect, if not more. And you could see, again, will this happen on this day? Chances are almost non-existent of that actually happening. But overall, a pretty active pattern, especially right here. It seems the first few weeks of November could really be active. And then maybe giving away to a little bit more of a calmer pattern, but still that flow off the west is impressive. So that's going to be, if that were to occur, that would be good if not great news, because, well, these areas, quite frankly, they need that precipitation here. So total QPF, you could see this model really advertising heavily for a lot of these areas to pick up a lot of moisture, which would definitely be beneficial. All right, that's basically it though, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya. Bye.